Well, I finally caught up with Don't Toy With Me and Miss Nagatoro, and it's actually getting pretty good. For the past few years I've been following this manga, and, well, I guess you could say it is a questionable one to have in your top 5. But it is the only one that has actually managed to keep me entertained for so long, since there is not a single manga series out there that I have read as long as this. Yeah, you got JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, you have Full Metal Alchemist, these are all critically acclaimed and have very unique styles, but this, what is this? I don't know either. If you don't know what Don't Toy With Me, Miss Nagatoro is, it's sort of this high school slice of life, romantic comedy about this ecchi girl who bullies her senior year upperclassmen. But the Nagatoro series has been out for quite some time. I think it's now been 5 years since its initial release. It started off as a webcomic, but we don't talk about that, okay?
One thing I wanted to talk about in this video is the anime. Back in 2021, Don't Toy With Me, Miss Nagatoro finally got its anime adaptation, and oh boy, it was one I had to sit down for. When I was younger, I wasn't too into Nagatoro as much as I am now, but when the anime adaptation was announced, it piqued my interest once again, and I watched it. I remember the experience pretty well, since every time a new episode came out, my friends and I would hop in a call and watch it together. It was fun, but I wasn't too satisfied with the anime.
Initially, on launch of the anime, I was kind of hyped. I was waiting for it for years already, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is my favorite series. It's gonna get animated. And then it did.
To be fair, back then I actually was more into Nagatoro for its comedy, and not as much for the romance, since around that time I had missed out on the newer chapters, so this is all in retrospect, reflecting on the older chapters. That's to say, the actual adaptation is pretty darn good and hilarious. If you're not super into the romance part, the first season does very well with weirding you out and constantly making you laugh.
I don't know what it is about this series in particular getting animated, because I've read other manga and then watched their anime. But there was something that just made me feel uneasy about seeing Nagatoro animated, because to me, it doesn't really flow that well.
What I meant by that is the way the story moves in the anime doesn't really translate too well compared to the manga. The events are put out of order, and there are many minor moments which are looked over. It's definitely pretty much what you'd expect from an adaptation for such a series, but otherwise I can say with confidence that the animation is very nice and it depicts everything pretty accurately, with some exceptions in season 1. It's still funny and has its over-the-top gags as well as its charm. The only small problem I have with the anime are the skip chapters here and there, but they don't affect the story much, even though it holds a bit of relevance to the characters' relationships.
I can definitely say that I do like Second Attack more than the first season, because, well, it gets more into the romance factor of it, and that's really all I'm interested as far as the story goes, which is another thing I do want to talk about. The story.
As I mentioned earlier, the basic premise is about a high school girl who bullies her senpai into submission, but in reality, it's her way of showing that she's interested and wants to be close to him. And with every chapter, their relationship goes beyond just teasing. The story itself is sweet. It's nice to see how the author, Nanash, managed to flip around a giant kinkfest into an actual love story with drama and character development, rather than what it was in the first few chapters. It starts off as just teasing, but over time becomes more wholesome and straightforward, while before any hints of romance were actually quite subtle, and it's constantly building up to a big thing and breaking it down to keep that tension, keeping you hooked and waiting for the next chapter. Or if you're like me, you speed read all the chapters you missed and feel completely burnt out afterwards.
If you don't follow the series and you only watch the anime, you might not be very familiar with it.
The skip chapters, that is. But putting that aside, reading the manga feels much more enjoyable than the anime, and I'm not sure why. Reading volume by volume, chapter after chapter, feels right, and you can pace it however you like. While in the anime, the story feels awfully stretched out, even though it's supposed to be more condensed. But the overall flow feels more natural when reading it. So to say, I'm only on episode 7 of Second Attack.
Now, this is some good stuff.
This is obviously just my opinion, but in general I have a hard time watching anime and in recent times stuck to the manga, and this is no exception. At the same time, I really do love the anime, so maybe I'm a hypocrite.
But I think the adaptation's good.
To close the section about the anime, Season 1 is great, as well as Season 2, but for two different reasons. I think the first part really shows what Nagatoro initially was, being teasing and jokes and whatnot, way before the romantic hints later on, while part 2 is basically just the romance part. Both are really good, and if you don't feel like reading the 120 odd chapters, watching it is a must.
It's actually sort of hard to believe that we're now on volume 16 and things have escalated so much. And this is a series that took 7 volumes to actually get any sort of romance out of. I think the manga could have ended at like volume 8, or no, volume 7, let's just say, because at that point, the romance starts being very obvious and both characters start to like each other. The reason I even got into Nagatoro in the first place was a really long time ago in the distant year of 2019. I stumbled upon this YouTube video called, I think it's I Adore Her or something like that. I'll put it on screen. And it was sort of this AMV about these two characters, and it was sort of lewd or whatever. And that actually spiked my interest. So eventually I read it and really enjoyed it. It wasn't anything special, but I think it was just a breath of fresh air for me, because around that time I was mostly sticking to shonen anime like My Hero Academia and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. So I read it online, and eventually I kind of forgot about the series for a long time. And then I picked it up again, and this time I actually started collecting it. Another thing I love about Nagatoro as a story is that the arc we're currently in is just completely bonkers. Currently, both sides know that they like each other a lot, and they're both competing to confess. Without saying it though. And this ties in a lot into the previous events where they would make promises to each other, and it's a cute aspect. It's crazy. All the side characters know, and they're all pushing each other forward. It's just cool to see it all come together in the end. I'm kind of sad because that makes me think maybe the final volume will be out soon, because we're on chapter 126 and we're getting so close to the actual confession. So I'm curious to see what will happen, and I'm loving it so far. I'm hoping the series continues, at least for another year or something, because I need this, okay? I need this.
Check 1, 1, 2, check 1, 1, 2. Okay, I read the last chapter, which just came out today, and I have some things to say. Let's go! Guys, finally, it's all coming together after 126 chapters. But also, wait, it's not? Somehow this felt like the shortest chapter of Nagatoro, probably since there's little to no dialogue and it's all mostly just Senpai and Hayase enjoying their time together. Senpai finally admitted to himself and even Nagatoro that it was a date, then proceeded to fall asleep on her lap. What a chapter. I salute you, Nanash. But as usual, everything is cut off and ends right then and there. Well, another 2 weeks of waiting begins. I had to read the chapter via 4chan thread, which was possibly the most underwhelming way to read it. But at least I got to see such quotes as, "That's it, I'm dropping this shit," and so many others. But that's my update on the chapter, so back to the video.
But yeah, I just wanted to make a video about Nagatoro, and it's why it's my favorite manga series. I really like it. It's nice. It has a good balance of sort of comedy and romance itself. It can be very questionable at times, but also that sort of thing is why I think it appealed to so many people in the first place. But I love Nagatoro. It's definitely my favorite manga series from the past few years. Besides Dan to Dan, and if you haven't read Dan to Dan, you should. But hey, Nagatoro. I love it. You probably don't, but that's your opinion. It's wrong though. Putting that aside, I'm hoping to actually make another video related to manga or anime in general, because it's something I've been wanting to do for a very long time and never really got to, because I'm pretty bad at reviewing things. I have a thought at the beginning and then completely forget that thought, and the same thing happened with this video. This is actually the second time I'm recording this, and who knows if I'll do a third time. To me, it's strange that something I used to read ironically actually became one of my favorite series of all time, but you know, it is what it is. So I'll see you guys some other time. Hope you enjoyed this probably very long video. And yeah, this has been me, Psychotica, and I'll see you internet users some other time. See ya.
Stereo, it's the boy again. I mean, the cocky motherfucker, all he do is win. I mean, the edgy sense of love comes on my undercover. Fuck around and with the rubber, throw straight of it like another. Oh my god, that's the ring. These cars on that lane. They say when they hear my voice, it's like from Methazine.